It's a good morning to you. Welcome to Asake Online. My name is Zenzele Ndebele, and this is the Breakfast Club. Today in our program, we'll be focusing on education. I know a few days ago we had a program where we were looking at issues that are faced primary school kids, why some schools have zero pass rate from, we looked at Lupane district and what the Lupane University is doing. And that was quite an interesting program with a lot of feedback on many other issues. So today in our program, we are looking at education in crisis, a report that was produced by the Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union. And to help me discuss this issue, I'm joined by Obert Masaraure, who is the national president of this association. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Zenzele, for having me.
Yeah, we are actually doing this program at a time when the government has announced that the schools are going to open in about a week or two. The exam classes starting on the 15th, then the rest of the classes on the 22nd. Do you think the government is ready to actually get schools to open?
I think that is just a random declaration from a government which is not really interested in planning, a government which is not really prepared to engage. If we are going to look at the contextual realities, it is next to impossible to be opening schools unless the government is going to be working 24/7 to ensure that on the 15th we are ready. We are looking at the issue of teacher incapacitation. Teachers declared that they're incapacitated way back in 2020. This is the primary reason why schools failed to open on the 28th of September in 2020. Was teachers are incapacitated. Government robbed teachers of their salaries on October 2018, and the incapacitation is now apparent. Teachers can't afford the basics. They can't even afford to send their own children to the schools where they teach. Secondly, we are looking at the state of preparedness in the face of COVID-19. What has government done at the moment? Nothing is practically being done on the ground other than this declaration. Thirdly, we are looking at the issue of learner preparedness. Are the learners prepared for learning after a long period away from the schooling environment? We understand some have been abused, some have been engaged in child labor, among other issues. Do we have a counseling regime in place to ensure that we psych our learners to be ready to learn? Fourthly, we are looking at the state of the supporting pillars of education itself. The parents have to pay school fees for these learners to get back to school, but these parents are coming from a lockdown, a hard lockdown, and some of them are in the informal economy. Is government prepared to be paying fees and levies for those parents who cannot afford to be paying, so that our schools can be fully operational? We are looking also at the commuting public. Is the government going to be opening up for private operators to also assist, come in and complement the ZUPCO? Because we understand the waiting time right now before the schools open for just one ZUPCO bus is up to more than 30 minutes. What if we are going to be opening schools? What happens to the commuting learners and teachers? We have to be commuting. So these are some of the issues which we hope can be addressed before schools can be safely and effectively open.
You know, you mentioned quite a number of challenges, and one wonders that, where do you start with these issues? But let me just look at the issue of incapacitation. Are there any negotiations that are going on with the government when it comes to the salaries and the welfare of teachers?
Government is shying away from engagement. So last year they promised that by January 31st they would have engaged the workers and come up with a roadmap on how they are going to be restoring the value of our salaries, which were robbed in October 2018. But now we are in February, in March, we don't have the roadmap. What we simply hear of our promises that they are going to engage us, but as we speak right now, there are no formal engagements going on. And you understand that the government is taking advantage of the flawed legal framework. The government is still to align the ancillary laws governing labor in the civil service to be in sync with the dictates of Section 65, which provides for collective bargaining. So as civil servants, we don't have a right to collective bargaining because of the laws at the moment. So government is taking advantage. They're dragging their feet, and we know they would want to push us into the classroom without addressing the salary crisis.
Yeah, you mentioned other issues like the fees and the preparedness and all these things. I mean, according to you or your union, what do you think what needs to be done for the schools to open safely besides the issue of the teacher salaries?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think for schools to open safely, uh, one, uh, let's deal with learner preparedness. Let's have a counseling regime in place to ensure that we psych our learners to be ready for learning. Secondly, let's go to the issues around COVID-19. Let's have a vaccination program for all the adults who participate in the physical learning environment in our schools. Uh, then secondly, let's have compulsory testing for both the learners and the teachers and anyone else who participate in the physical learning environment, so that our schools don't become super spreaders of COVID-19. But also let's capacitate our schools to fully adhere to the standard operating procedures, which were set by government itself using WHO health protocols. So this is around the issue of COVID-19 safety. So, but we don't also want to have a very long wish list. We don't want to appear, we know there are a lot of things that have to be addressed, but we don't want to appear like we just want to make it impossible to open schools. So maybe let's confine ourselves to dealing with the incapacitation crisis and dealing with learner preparedness plan and the COVID safety. Then let's get our schools open, because our learners have already missed learning time, and we don't want to keep them out of schools for a very long time. Well, the longer they are away from the school, the more difficult it is going to be for most of them to return back to school.
Yeah, you mentioned the issue that the longer they take to be out of school, some of them definitely are not going to go to school, and we have seen that in the last year, some kids have with females have fallen pregnant, others have migrated, others have been gone into forced marriages, forced labor. How has the lockdown affected the education system?
Yeah, it has impacted negatively on the almost 4.6 million learners of Zimbabwe. Their access to education, only less than 10%, the access to remote learning. You agree with me that Zimbabwe doesn't even have a remote learning policy. We don't have a alternative learning policy outside the formal classroom. So without the formal classroom, uh, the majority of our learners did not access education. Now, when they were away from the school, some of them engaged in child labor, and some are now permanently employed when they're still children. Some are now in married. Uh, some have already moved on to do other things that are not related to learning. Some are already in drugs and are addicted. This is now going to be difficult to take them out of all that. So at the end of the day, the access to education, the achievement of sustainable development goal number 4 has been really compromised, and we really need to do a lot of work to bridge this particular gap of access, which was created by the COVID-19 crisis. And the COVID-19 crisis did impact on the existing challenges, because our sector was already suffering from neglect, years of neglect from our government. And now when this crisis caught us flat-footed, and we could not maneuver around it. And even some teachers right now are no longer interested in teaching. The government used to threaten people that we will fire you, but teachers are resigning en masse. They realize that they can do much better selling vegetables on the streets. Some have realized that they can cross the border and just work in some garden in South Africa or in Botswana. It is pays better than teaching in Zimbabwe. So we now have a crisis of teachers now digging in, not taking anything other than a living wage. And we now have learners who are not ready to learn, teachers who are no longer prepared to teach without their conditions being met. And then we have again a government which is not prepared to play ball with regard to teacher salaries and with regard to ensuring that we have a harmonious labor relations between the workers and the employer side.
You recently released a report which focuses on, which say entitled "The Education in Crisis." What are some of the highlights that are, in your report? What are some of the issues or the findings?
Okay, so the report particularly focuses on one. The first chapter focuses on the gaps of access to education which were created by the pandemic. We realized that after losing almost 6 months of learning in 2020, and now we have lost 10 months of learning so cumulatively. So what that means, that report is trying to unpack the learning gaps that were created because of COVID-19. Then secondly, we are focusing on the challenges that were faced by the learners themselves. Then thirdly, we are focusing on the challenges faced by the teachers. Are the teachers prepared to get back to teach? And then we also focus on government responses to the crisis points that are raised in the education crisis report. And the report finds that the government's responses are inadequate to the education crisis. And being inadequate also, then they are also poorly implemented. Then we make recommendations, substantial recommendations to government. And last year we were recommending the postponement of exams because we thought learners were not ready, and we still do the same today. We're recommending for a realistic grade transition plan, which we still do today. We're recommending for engagement between the teachers and government to solve the salary crisis, which we still do today. And we still recommend for getting private players back in the transport business so that we ease the pressure on Zoom, among other recommendations. But what we also gathered is that we are losing more learners daily. The more the schools remain closed, the more we lose more learners. The more schools remain closed, the more brain drain is also kicking in for teachers who are walking away from the sector completely. And then the gap of learning is also increasing by day, the more we keep the schools closed.
This was, let me say, this was a program that I was doing, or it was a discussion. I was talking to Obert Masaraure, who is the national president of Amalgamated Teachers Union. We were looking at the education sector, the challenges that they are facing, but also the report that they produced recently entitled the crisis or education in crisis, looking at many issues that are affecting the education sector, including the lockdown, facilities, talking about the teachers' unhappiness with the salary and many other poor working conditions. And I hope that this program has given us an idea of the challenges that are faced by the education sector and by the students as they go back to school. That they have a lot of ground to cover, but they're also coming in a situation whereby the teachers are not happy, and some of the teachers might not actually turn up for teaching. So the kids are supposed to be preparing for classes and exams. They're supposed to be going all out to learn, but we still have the COVID pandemic, which is affecting everyone, and there are likely to be disturbances. They are likely to be, maybe coming in groups, and that is going to affect their performance. So this was the program where we're just looking at these issues and asking what can be done to solve some of these problems. My name is Zenzele Ndebele. Till we meet again in another program.